In today's video, we're going to get the perfect photo by making a Polaroid quilt block. Hi, I'm Kim Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts, and today I want to talk to you about how to use those fabrics that you have that you thought were so cute and you bought them but you didn't know what to do with them. Well, they would probably make a really great Polaroid block. Now, if you're wondering what I'm talking about, if you're not familiar with those type of quilt blocks, they are ones that look like they were a photo taken with a Polaroid camera. So you can see I've got some examples here. So you usually have a fussy cut piece of fabric in the center, Go Flames, and you can see what they will look like when they're done. You'll notice that we've got borders on all four sides. These three are the same width, however, the one at the bottom is wider, just like you see in the Polaroid photos. Now, I want to talk first about fabric considerations, all right? So what is a good fabric to use for these blocks and what maybe isn't such a great fabric to use for these blocks? So you saw these ones here that I had that were fussy cut, and I'm going to explain that in just a moment too. But some people will take fabrics like these. Now they've got all these different designs in them, but you can see they have a different look than the ones where you're just picking one motif to put in the center. I think these are a little more effective. Nothing wrong with these. I'm just saying you might want to consider that when you're looking at your fabric choices for making this type of a block. So these are kind of what we call like a scatter print. All right, so it's all over the fabric, but there's a lot more happening in here without really one focal point. Maybe the butterfly in this one. If you look at this one, this is a better example. There's not really a focal point in the center of that block as there is in the ones with the kittens, for example. So I pulled a few fabrics here just to give you some ideas of what you should be looking for when you want to make a Polaroid quilt block. And this is just my opinion, right? You can pick whatever you want. It's your block. So here is a design. I believe this is by Lynette Anderson, and you can see all these different little motifs in here. So there's lots of opportunity to pick out a little part of this fabric and make it a center motif on the Polaroid quilt block. Here's another one here too. So you can see there's all these individual scenes here. Now, depending on how big, usually your center of your Polaroid block is 2.5 inches. You could make it bigger, I suppose, and adjust everything accordingly. But you can see there's different scenes here. And if you were trying to decide what you wanted to pick out here, you could use something like, this is actually from Martelli. This is their fussy cut templates, and their squares, or no slip squares here I'm using. But this gives me an opportunity to frame and see what would I actually fit in that 2.5 inch square. So if you have a bigger scene, like here, for example, I'm not going to be able to fit the whole thing in. Maybe I'm fitting in, just the cats on the roof, for example, or maybe just a couple of them with the dormer window. So you have those opportunities in this type of fabric. If you go with one like this, I think this is super cute, with all the little kittens on it. So you could actually pick out lots of different ones here. You can see they work really well because you've got a lot of background space behind them. That's what you're looking for. A lot of background space makes it a little easier to fussy cut out of those types of fabric. And then I have this one with little bunnies all over it, so I could pick a few bunnies. Now, even though there's kind of not a focal point, if you will, in here, you can see these individual bunnies. They're not just, a whole bunch of them smushed together, if it were. We don't want smushed bunnies, do we? So you could certainly audition your fabric using the Martelli system. If you don't have that, you could certainly make your own out of cardstock. So this is the size of the block. I'm going to talk about this block in just a sec, but this is the size of the block, and this is the size of the center cut, which would work out to actually 2 inches by 2 inches when it's finished. So you can make this with cardstock, and that works equally well to see what would work. Now, if you're using something like this, you're going to have to draw in here and add 1/4 inch on every side before you actually cut. So this is not a cutting template, just a viewing one. Okay, so let's talk about this little block here too. So this one here, you can see looks a little different. That's because this person chose to put this on a diagonal. So you can see what the fabric would look like here. So that's another option too. Think about moving your templates around. Let's see if I can go back here for a second to the first one. You might want to move your little template around on an angle, because you might get more bang for your buck here. For example, if you're looking at this tree and you put it on an angle like that, it's probably working a little better than here, where you might actually cut off some of the tips of the tree the tops of the tree, I said, and even the bottom there, when you actually stitch it in, because you're going to lose a 1/4 inch off that, right? All right, so consider putting it on an angle, right? That's kind of fun, something a little different. Okay, now you've talked about the different fabric considerations and what would make a good Polaroid quilt block as far as that center part. Then you've got the little borders around the edge as well. So let me just pull this back for a second here and go over these. So as I said, you've got 4 borders. Don't we always, right? So here's one I cut from that one fabric, and you can see that I've kind of set this off center a little bit, right? I didn't just have the tree, I kind of wanted a little more going on, so something else to think about. Then we've got 2 sides here, and these are each 1 inch by 2.5 inches, so they're 1 inch wide, 2.5 inches long. You're going to put those on first. Then you're going to put the top on. That is also 1 inch by 3.5, okay? And then the bottom, which is always a little bit wider, right? It's 1.5 by 3.5 inches. So you're going to put the 2 sides on, the top, the bottom, and then you're going to come out with a Polaroid block like this. So I'm just going to do that on the machine. I'll come back and show you how this one looks once it gets its borders on. I finished sewing this little block together, and here's what it looks like. So you can see again the difference here. We've got these kittens here. Here I've got more like a little scene going on. Still quite effective though, I think, and kind of cute, right? So once you've made these blocks and used up some of your scrap fabric and got to be an expert at fussy cutting, you want to put them together into a quilt. Probably, right? Maybe you'll be like me and still have them in the bag for a few years, but hey, let's hope you're going to make a quilt out of them. And so what could you do with these blocks? Well, I've got several examples for you. Now, before I get into those ideas for you, I want to say thank you and a big shout out to my Patchwork Pal members. These are people who are in my Patchwork Pals YouTube membership, and for a very small monthly fee, they get lots of fun perks, including early access to all my videos. So if you're interested in supporting the Chatterbox Quilts YouTube channel, please click on the join button below any of my videos. You can get all the details and even become a member today. Now let's talk about some of those ideas. I've got some mocked up for you in EQ8. You could take these blocks and just put them next to each other side by side. They already have that kind of border around them. They may be white like I've got, that's traditionally what you have, or they could be another color. But you could just put them together. You might even want to make a small mini quilt like what I'm showing here. You could, of course, take them bigger and make a full quilt with them. And if you're going to do this, I'd suggest that you put some sashing between the blocks for a number of reasons. One is because it will make the quilt a little bit bigger, quicker than continuing to add all these small blocks in, okay? And it just gives a break between them because there's going to be a lot of blocks in. These are small blocks, so there's going to be a lot of them in a full-size quilt. So having that sashing between gives a bit of a break and gives your eye somewhere to rest. And as I said, it'll make that quilt come together a lot quicker than having to make more Polaroid quilt blocks. Now, what about making something kind of different here? And why don't you create a cross kind of effect? So if you have, say, a square made up of different Polaroid blocks, so maybe you have 3 by 3 rows, 3 columns of Polaroid blocks, then you put a bigger piece of fabric in between, maybe a 6-inch piece of fabric, and then another grouping of those 3 by 3 quilt blocks. That makes the top part of your quilt, and then you add another 6-inch strip horizontally, I should say, all the way across underneath that, and then add another section the same as you did in the top. So it gives you this kind of cross in the center, and I think this is really interesting as well, something a little different that you might not have thought of doing. So whatever you want to do with your Polaroid blocks, I'm sure it'll be lots of fun. It's a great way to use up your scrap fabrics. It's a great way to use some of those fabrics that you thought were so cute. I have a gazillion of them in my fabric stash, and this is the perfect project for them. Now, I've talked about how to make the block. I mentioned the Martelli system that I like to use, but I didn't really go into detail with that. So if you're wondering how you use that, don't worry, I got you covered. Check out this video that has all the helpful information that you need. And for more helpful quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.